Good morning and happy Thursday. Today we're exploring the cognitive bias. It's kind of a cognitive bias, referred to as tachyphasia. So, tachyphasia, though it plays into cognitive biases and it is relevant to cognitive biases, sometimes listed as one, but really it's about it's a neurological phenomenon, where basically it's the perception of time and the distortion of our perception of time. So, simple examples of this that you will have experienced, I'm sure, are those moments where time seems to slow right down, where a second feels like a lifetime. But also, as you get older, it feeling like or seeming like time's speeding up. And I'm going to explain both of those and some more stuff in just a moment. But first, I think it's worth taking a moment to think about and look at how we perceive time. Now, I could go into the fascinating physics and metaphysics of time and what it really is and how it works, but I mean, that's really fun to explore and to look into and think about and question. But it's a whole other topic. So let's put that to one side and just focus on time as we understand it as a linear, supposedly linear experience of ours. So time perception is typically categorized in three ranges, because we understand time differently, or the duration, uh, in in different circumstances in different areas of the brain. So we talk about sub-second timing or millisecond timing, um, which is kind of something we perceive as a subconscious regulation of time, if you like, interval timing or seconds to minute timing, and circadian timing. So our natural bodily rhythms help us keep an understanding of the passing of time as well. So there are lots of different theories about the actual mechanics of time perception within our brain and how we think about it. Um, for example, there's the strength model of time memory, which basically says, right, how strong is this memory, and therefore how recent is it? But I don't know about you, that doesn't sound very great to me. I'm sure there are things you can remember really strongly that happened a long time ago that were very emotionally impactful, and things that happened yesterday that you have no recollection of. So I don't know. I'm not sold on that one myself, but it is one of the theories that's out there. Another one is the inference model. So basically, it's looking at the time of the event based relative to other events whose date and time is known. I mean, we kind of do that cognitively, don't we? We do that logically. Someone asks you, "Oh, how old were you when this happened?" You kind of think, well, let's think, where did it happen? Well, I would have been in middle school when it happened, so I would have been between these, and you work it out that way. But I don't think that really clearly explains how we subconsciously and automatically seem to be able to process a lot of time, and certainly how we perceive the passing of time. That doesn't really stick with me either. So I find those a little bit weak. But another hypothesis, which I personally um, feel is incomplete and unfinished, but fascinating, the hypothesis that we have sort of a subconscious tallying of pulses, right? So there's some kind of internal brain pulse that we acknowledge, like a kind of biological second hand, if you like, that's ticking, not necessarily to the second. So the idea being that we can run multiple biological stopwatches all at the same time, and that helps us understand the passing of time and keep rhythm with things. Now, if you're a drummer, that will probably make a lot of sense to you, because you probably have that mental timing in your mind really clearly, or other musicians too. And one of the reasons why I quite like that interpretation, or that element of looking at it within that hypothesis, is that I've experienced that and seen other people experience that a lot. For example, when I teach self-hypnosis, um, invariably what happens, so I have a group full of people all wanting to learn about the mind and self-hypnosis and how they can connect better with their subconscious, use it to their advantage. And as part of the introduction, there's a group hypnosis, and everyone just enjoys hypnosis for the sake of relaxation, and it feels lovely and it's great, and they all get the chance to experience what it feels like. And then when I wake them up, um, I ask how long they think it is, and most of the time it's about 40 to 45 minutes, and most people say, I don't know, about 10, maybe 15 minutes. Some people say a bit less, some people say a bit more. And so they've got no real clear concept of the passing of time when they first experience that. Because they're relying on their expected conscious perception of the passing of time, which is very different to the way you experience something like hypnosis or a deep trance state, in the same way that we're not really aware of the passing of time when we sleep. And yet, by the end of the weekend, I get people to do the same thing and expect to wake up in 5 minutes. And I don't give any clues or hints or anything at all whatsoever, and everyone closes their eyes, and I just quietly time them. And sure enough, most people get it pretty much bang on. And yet they're still in that altered state, in that relaxed state. So there must be some ability that we have that's built in for us to recognize that consistency and that passing of time, even in that altered state, if we just rely on our subconscious mind to do it. Rather than thinking about and trying to calculate that timing, if we just decide that that's going to be the time that we open our eyes and we forget about it and enjoy the experience and the relaxation, the subconscious mind goes, right, that's time. And you've probably experienced this yourself to a point. Is there anyone out there who sets an alarm and then you find yourself waking up 2 minutes before that alarm goes off, pretty much consistently? There's a great example of it. Or if you know you've got to be up at a certain time, or you're just used to being up at a certain time, your brain, your body goes, okay, it's time to wake up now, because this is the time we wake up. You know, like you wake up at 6 o'clock through the week and you think, I might lay in at the weekend, and then sure enough, Saturday morning, 6 o'clock, ping, I'm awake. These are all just examples that kind of support that hypothesis. Anyway, now that we've spoken a little bit about that, let's go back to the tachyphasia and what that actually is and what that looks like. So tachyphasia, that time distortion, a great example of this for me personally that I remember experiencing really well was when I had a car accident. And it was freezing cold but dry. Good morning, Mads. Freezing cold but dry, and a mains water pipe had burst, sprayed water across the road, and it had frozen. So there was just this sheet of ice across the surface of the road. I came round a blind bend. I was on the way to Hemel at the time, actually, Maddie. That was back when we were working together. And as I hit the ice, I tried to steer into the skid, but there was nothing I could do. I was just going this way, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. And I remember kind of thinking to myself, just relax and hope it doesn't hurt too much, which is a really weird thought to have in that moment, but it worked because it didn't hurt. But in that moment, time slowed. I was very much aware of the fact that I had the time to think, well, I've tried this, I've tried that, there's nothing I can do, just relax, da da da. And I was aware of the movement of the car as it went into the ditch and twisted round, and tree where my door used to be, and a branch that came through the windscreen to here, which I didn't really notice much of until afterwards. But that whole thing, that whole moment slowed right down. Now, my interpretation of why that happens is because we're processing. So it happens, and it's been documented to happen when we're in a state of high arousal, so high stress. Particularly, we have a burst of norepinephrine, a burst of dopamine, kind of like that adrenaline rush, you know, that fight or flight situation where our brain just goes, we need to be processing this, we need to be ready, and we need to deal with this situation. So to my interpretation of it, and I'm not saying this bit's necessarily scientifically sound or proven, but the brain is firing and working much faster to process all of this information. And if it's used to working at this speed and processing information, when it's working at this speed and going brrr, then it's effectively the calculation of everything that's happening you can calculate more information in a shorter space of time. Therefore, that shorter space of time feels like it's longer because you've got more time to process things happening in that space of time. I hope that makes sense. Um, so, so that's kind of the slowing down of time, and that's been shown to happen when we have that high stress state. But another example, and actually this can be really useful as well. This can be really, really handy. So a great time when this comes into play is when people are a bit nervous about doing something like public speaking, and they stand on stage and they kind of lose track of where they were going or what they were going to say next. And in that moment, that pause feels like a lifetime when everyone's watching, waiting on your next word. And that can be really terrible, really detrimental, and it can then make you feel even more pressure and cause an even bigger problem and so on. But equally, you can use that time and you can go, brilliant. This second feels like a lifetime. That means I've got a lifetime to breathe, calm down, think about what I'm going to say next, and continue. And actually, it can really work well for you in that sense. So then, what about the other way around? Time seems to speed up as well as slowing down sometimes. So here's a great example of this. People talk about as they're getting older, um, time just seems to go faster, right? How is it already the 12th of August? That's just crazy. This year just seems to have gone so much. And to be fair, when you've got something like a pandemic and lockdowns and things like this going on, there's even more weird timey-wimey stuff and distortion of time because certain things that you judge the passing of time by just through habit and what you're used to aren't happening, and so that everything kind of blends together and each day's the same if you're not going out and doing different things, seeing different people, so it can all become very confusing. But here's the thing, as you get older, it's no wonder that your perception of time changes. When you're 5 years old, 2.5 years is half of your life, right? When you're 2, 1 year is half of your life. So the total amount of time that you've experienced is 2 years, and half of that, 50% of your time on this earth, was a year. So a year is a really long time. By the time you get to 50, 1 year is just a 50th of your life. You've experienced 50 years of existence, so 1 year really isn't very long in the grand scheme of things. Imagine if you were immortal. You were a vampire and you're 300 years old, 2,000 years old. A year, psh, it's just like a day, right? So, yeah, time is weird, right? And we experience it in different ways. One of the ways you can really use this to your advantage is to find ways to experience more awe in your life. Or as in AWE, not go mining for metal. When we feel awe, we experience kind of a sense of grandness and expansion of space and time. Maybe that sounds a little bit hippie in how I'm putting it across, and there's nothing wrong with hippie. Hippie's great. But it's shown that we experience perception differently when we feel awe, and that slows time down as well. Go and put yourself in situations like going on a hike, climbing a mountain, whatever is within your physical capability, and just look out over vast areas. Feel that awe and be inspired by it, because it really does change the way that your brain is working in that moment, including therefore your perception of time, and really allows you to kind of escape, if you like, in a really positive and very real way, the monotony of the passing of time, as it were. It really engages creativity, and it's a wonderful thing to do. So get yourself out there, find something that inspires awe within you, and enjoy that. The other benefit of that is that as we view things, as our perception increases, so we're looking at things perspective at a great distance. That's a large perspective. to cover, it also helps us view things from a larger perspective within our mind. So there's a kind of a shift on the way that we see and think about things, which can be really easily encouraged by putting yourself in a situation where you see that. Excellent comment. So lunch break phenomenon lasts 30 minutes of work. So the last 30 minutes of work takes ages, but a 30-minute lunch break is gone in a flash. That's a great example. So ways that you can work on that, improve that, or change that is make time within your lunch break to be more mindful. Take a moment to just stop and be. Maybe focus on your breathing. Maybe go for a quick walk and find a nice view, if that's practical, depending on how you work and where your lunch break is, etc. But yeah, find ways to embrace the time as it's passing during that lunch break, and that'll actually generally make it seem to last longer. Okay, so there we go. That is tachyphasia. That is the distortion of our perception of time. I hope you found that really helpful, or at least interesting, or at least vaguely amusing. Thanks very much for tuning in. I'll be back again, same time next week, 9:30 every Thursday morning. Catch me live on my Facebook page or in my group. If you're not in my group, you should be in my group. It's an awesome place full of really lovely people. So just search for Empower Yourself and Others on Facebook, and of course on YouTube, where I'm going to be putting out a load more content in the not too distant future. So be sure to subscribe to that. Thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. Have an awesome day and enjoy the rest of your week.